It was an incredibly busy weekend by the Minnesota Vikings front office, signing backup quarterback Carson Wentz. And I'm going to explain why a major trade is about to go down for the Vikings very, very soon. But let's start with Carson Wentz. The Minnesota Vikings worked out Carson Wentz this weekend in Eagan and liked what they saw. So they signed Carson Wentz to a 1-year, $1 million deal. And they also trade backup quarterback Sam Howell to the Philadelphia Eagles. And they had to give up some capital to get Sam Howell in their trade with the Seahawks. But they regained that capital and then some by getting what they got from the Eagles. A 5th round pick, a 7th round pick. So the Sam Howell trade was basically a wash. And here's when that trade went down. The Sam Howell trade went down in the second preseason game when he twisted and turned his body. He tried to spin out of the pocket. He launched a ball up for grabs, and it was intercepted. That play has not escaped the mind of Kevin O'Connell. That play in and of itself changed the direction of the Vikings for their backup quarterback spot because Kevin O'Connell in that moment no longer trusted Sam Howell. Now, as far as the conversation with Carson Wentz, this is interesting. He has been with 6 teams in the past 6 seasons. And you take a look at these teams, and they're not bad teams. 2020 Philadelphia, 2021 Indianapolis, 2022 Washington, 2023 LA Rams, and 2024 Kansas City Chiefs. And an interesting nugget about Carson Wentz, did you know he's from North Dakota? And he grew up as a Vikings fan? Have you ever heard that before? And what's also interesting is that he was the former teammate of Coach Josh McCown, and he knows the Vikings system because he was with the Rams in 2023. And Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell run practically the same offensive system. But what stands out to me above all of Carson Wentz's previous teams and this system is the date that Carson Wentz was signed. Because he was signed officially on the Vikings roster on August 24th. And we cannot overlook the date of the signing, because the date of the signing tells you a ton about that player's interest around the league. If Carson Wentz had it his way, if all the stars aligned in Carson Wentz's mind, he would not have signed with the Vikings on August 24th. But rather, he would have been with a team months ago, while mandatory OTAs were going on. But the interest from other teams was very limited, or at least it was not what he wanted. Maybe Carson Wentz was looking for a quarterback availability where he could potentially start. Well, that's not happening in Minnesota, and maybe that's why he waited this long to sign and work out with the Vikings. Or maybe the Chiefs, the Rams, the Eagles, the Colts, the Command, maybe they didn't want him back as their backup quarterback. But the fact that he was coached by Andy Reid, Sean McVay, And now Kevin O'Connell tells me that the brightest minds in the NFL wanted Carson Wentz as their backup quarterback. So Carson Wentz has a legitimate amount of skills to fulfill the role as backup quarterback. And sometimes I see the backup quarterback position getting made fun of. And I saw someone post, if Carson Wentz is in the game, the season is practically over for the Vikings anyway. And I don't agree with that statement. I believe that the backup quarterback position has become one of the most important positions in the NFL, because what NFL front offices recognize is if our starting quarterback is injured for a certain amount of time, we don't want our team to be completely screwed if he does get injured. So you see many teams placing a huge importance on that backup quarterback position. And I think that's what the Vikings are doing. McCarthy missed the entire season last year. And if he is injured again, you want someone that is more trustworthy than Sam Howell. And that's why they traded him and brought in Carson Wentz. So although he was signed August 24th, and that says a lot about a player's interest around the league, I do believe that this was the right decision. And this brings me to my next point. Carson Wentz has been slandered for years in the NFL. I think many people forget that Carson Wentz was going to win the MVP the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. It was a guarantee. And then he got hurt. And then Nick Foles steps in, wins the Super Bowl. And then Carson Wentz couldn't get over those demons of Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl. I mean, think about it. Think about it in your own personal life. If you're having the greatest business year of your life, making deals left and right, and then all of a sudden, you need a surgery for a herniated disc, and you're out months, and then your replacement comes in and makes the biggest deal of his life, and then you're supposed to come back and fill those shoes. This replacement becomes the CEO, and then you come back to work. Do you think there's a little pressure there? Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl for the Eagles, and then Carson Wentz comes back and becomes the starter. And it's like Nick Foles just won the Super Bowl. The backup just had one of the craziest all-time runs in NFL history as a backup quarterback. And then Carson Wentz could never regain that confidence, that strut, the ability to dominate a game like he once did. And Carson Wentz's last full season starting with the Colts, he had 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Those are really, really good numbers. And here's the problem that people have with Wentz. And this has really followed him throughout these past few seasons of his career. Carson Wentz, he has a few mind-blowing, idiotic plays that gets the fan questioning, what the heck were you doing? What kind of idiotic play or performance was that? What were you thinking? And those plays have applied to the rest of his career. Just like a Patrick Mahomes behind-the-back pass can apply to the rest of his career, or a no-look pass that still gets replayed from a few years ago applies to the rest of his career, Carson Wentz has had a few just mind-blowing, dumb plays. And those plays have applied to the rest of his career, regardless of the performance that he actually puts out on the field. Because Carson Wentz can play football. And that's why you've seen him coached by Andy Reid and Sean McVay. You see the brightest offensive minds bring in Carson Wentz as their backup quarterback. And the backup quarterback position has never been more valued by the smartest minds in football than it is right now. You take a look at Carson Wentz's touchdown to interception ratio, and this is about to blow your mind. Carson Wentz's touchdown to interception ratio is 2.28, meaning Carson Wentz has thrown about 2.28 touchdowns per every interception in his NFL career. That is a better touchdown to interception ratio than Peyton Manning and Joe Montana, who was throwing to the greatest wide receiver that has ever existed. Peyton Manning's touchdown to interception ratio throughout his career was 2.15, and Joe Montana's touchdown to interception ratio was 1.97. Of course, Carson Wentz is not those players, but it takes the recklessness that is thought of about Carson Wentz and puts it in proper context. Because many people think that Carson Wentz can't play, but he takes care of the football. He is careful with the football, has a very good touchdown interception ratio, better than two Hall of Famers. Yet the stereotype of Carson Wentz is that he's reckless, and that's not true. So the player that sticks out to me in comparison to Carson Wentz is JaVale McGee. JaVale McGee was made fun of on Shaqtin' a Fool for years by the TNT boys. Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny the Jet Smith, Ernie Johnson. JaVale McGee was one of the most made fun of players in the league because of these random idiotic decisions that looked funny on the basketball court. But the truth is, JaVale McGee could play. He is one of the most electric shot blockers in the league, and he could run down the court faster than any center. And he helped guide Stephen Curry and the Warriors to 2 championship rings. JaVale McGee could play, but you bring up that name and people are going to make fun of him. And that's the same with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz can play in the NFL at a high level, and he has proven that he can do it. But there's this stereotype because he's had a couple plays throughout his career that he can't play. But the truth is he can. All right, let me tell you about 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis because they transformed our bathroom in 48 hours. The entire thing. From a new floor, to a new bathtub, to a new shower. We got a new vanity, countertops. We went from a single to a double sink and a new mirror. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis remodeled our entire bathroom. And that's their promise for you as well. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis didn't just remodel our entire bathroom, they did it in 48 hours. Don't wait 8 weeks when 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis will get your bathroom done in 48 hours. It's going to happen, and that's their promise, their guarantee. Free consultations and affordable payment plans. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis. All right, what's next? A big Minnesota Vikings trade is about to go down. Here is the list of the draft capital the Minnesota Vikings have available to them in 2026. A first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, another third-round pick, 3 fifth-round picks, 2 sixth-round picks, and a 7th-round pick. Here's my guarantee. That's 10 picks available for the Vikings in 2026. The Vikings have no interest in keeping 10 of those picks. And here's why. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has made a clear change in direction these past few years. Instead of trading down and collecting draft capital, I'm going to trade up and give myself a higher probability of selecting a player that can play. We've seen that this past year. They didn't trade up, but their grade was lower by ESPN because they didn't trade down and instead selected Donovan Jackson. And I approve of that strategy 100 times out of 100 because I would rather the Vikings stick and select a player that they believe in, a player that they think will be great, rather than trade down 10 spots, select 2 guys that might be okay. And we saw it 2 years ago. The Vikings traded up 1 spot to draft McCarthy, and they traded up to select Dallas Turner. Now, we still need to figure out if these guys can play. We still need to figure that out. However, his aggressiveness has changed. His strategic approach to the draft has changed. Kwesi has no interest in having 2/3, 3/5, and 2 6th-round picks. He's collected this draft capital so that he can trade for a receiver, maybe Adam Thielen, in the coming days. What's so interesting about it is the Panthers' interest in keeping Adam Thielen, because the wide receiver core on the Panthers is young. And Adam Thielen might not be wide receiver 1, but he brings a wealth of experience to the table filled with young wide receivers. So the Panthers aren't willing just to give him up for practically nothing. So the Vikings, they collected draft capital. They traded Sam Howell and got a 5th. They got the comp from Sam Darnold. They got the comp from Daniel Jones. And here we are. They've got 10 picks in 2026. They have no interest in keeping this many picks. Kwesi is about to pull off a trade to bring in a wide receiver. That is my guarantee. Who the wide receiver is, it appears that their minds have been set on Adam Thielen and are providing the Panthers draft capital to get Adam Thielen back in a trade. Or maybe their eyes are set on someone else that requires draft capital like this to get. So, an interesting story to follow and something that you need to keep your eyes on, because the Vikings are about to make a trade. For who? We don't know, but a trade is about to go down. All right, let me tell you about Hochland Farms beef, because they have the best rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed beef. Contact Jared at 952-491-1541. That's 952-491-1541 for the best rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed beef. It's better for you, and it's financially responsible. You go to the grocery store for steaks and chuck roasts, you're looking at $9 to $10 a pound. Hochland Farm Beef has a flat rate of roughly $4 a pound for all their beef. Steaks, chuck roast, ribs, hamburger beef, and more. Contact Hochland Farms and tell Jared Tim sent you, and he'll give you 20% off your first order. 952-491-1541. 20% off your first order. Contact Hochland Farms right now. 952-491-1541. All right. A story that has been really the storyline of preseason football outside of J.J. McCarthy playing one series has been Max Brosmer. And by all indications, it would appear that Max is going to make the Vikings roster as QB3. They trade Sam Howell, bring in Carson Wentz. And Max Brosmer, he deserves to make the Vikings roster. He has played sensationally throughout preseason. And you watch what he has been able to do during his time on the field, and some of the time he's had on the field has been with the Vikings 3s, going against the Titans 1s. So the stuff he is doing on the field has been electric and elite. The timing, the anticipation, the accuracy. Brosmer has showcased all of it, and he has been at a severe disadvantage because of who he's playing with, because of who he's getting these reps with, and because of who he is competing against. Titans 1s. And it makes me come away with this conclusion. If Max Brosmer is given an opportunity to play, it's not going to be this season, and he is not going to be the backup to McCarthy because that's Carson Wentz's job. And he was never going to be the backup to McCarthy because you're not going to put a first-year starter on the field and then put an undrafted free agent quarterback on the field after him. It's not going to happen. It never would in a million years. Because the semantics just don't feel right for the Vikings. It might be the right decision, but as far as the Vikings and their decision-making process, they don't feel good about it. And I guaranteed that. That's why I said Howe would be the backup until this trade and signing happened. Brosmer was never going to be the guy. But if Brosmer is given a fair opportunity to play in the NFL, he will be an elite quarterback. If Brosmer is given the keys to an offense and is given trust by a head coach within the organization, Brosmer will be a very, very, very good to great NFL quarterback.
Up high, down hard.
And here's why. Brosmer combines multiple things within his game that quarterbacks dream of. And it's so easy to see on the tape. When you watch the game, it's so easy. Brosmer combines an elite level of accuracy and anticipation. So many quarterbacks want to throw the ball before a wide receiver breaks, and many of them are called to do it. However, there's a couple of problems with that. One, they don't trust it. They don't trust that the receiver is going to break. They don't trust their own arm. And two, they don't have the accuracy to pull it off. So one, they don't have the trust. They don't have the gunslinger mentality. They don't have the anticipation skills. And two, they don't have the accuracy to pull it off. There's a throw that Alec Lewis highlighted on his Twitter page, the writer for The Athletic, a Brosmer throw he had versus the Titans. I think he threw it to Lucky Jackson. Lucky Jackson wasn't even turned around yet, and he threw it 3 yards before he turned around. Hit him right in the chest, turned around, first down. Against the Titans once. Found the seam in the defense. When you see throws like that, I see a successful NFL player. And then he had another dart that was about 30 to 40 yards down the field to the sideline, in between the corner and safety. Not many quarterbacks are making that pass. And the reason why the Vikings released Brett Rypien and are trying to get him to the practice squad is because they know if they release Max Brosmer and try to get him to the practice squad, it's an impossible task. At this point in time, I would not be surprised if Max Brosmer had a more successful career than J.J. McCarthy. And it's really a shot at NFL organizations across the league. Because if they knew Brosmer had this skill set of anticipation and accuracy, which, to be fair, wasn't necessarily showcased all the time at the Gophers program, because PJ Fleck likes to run the ball. And throwing is not a huge emphasis within the Gophers program. But if teams knew that Brosmer combined the skill set that he showcased in the preseason, he would have been a third or fourth round pick easily. And you look at the best undrafted QBs to play in the league, Kurt Warner. He's got the movie about him, Warren Moon, former Vikings great at one point. Tony Romo. NFL organizations missed on quarterbacks all the time. So you've got to be careful when you look at these teams and you don't question their decision making, because their decision making is as much a guess as we have. I mean, seriously. They whiff all the time on first round picks, and they study the tape. They interview the guy. They know their history. They talk to their coaches, and they still whiff on all these guys. So one thing that I am so opinionated on is general managers, as much as they want to hoist themselves up as being this expert and knowing how this player functions and knowing good players from bad players and great from poor ones, it's like they have no freaking clue. They have no idea who's going to be good. They try to put together this list of players they think will be good and put together the probability of good or this, and you look at this, and they have no freaking idea. That's why you see so many busts in the first round of the NFL draft. You see so many guys that can't play. And you see a 2022 NFL draft class by the Vikings that is one of the worst in history, because there's like two guys left on that team, Ty Chandler and Jalen Naylor. And I mean, it's like, be careful when you see decision makers within the league hoist themselves up as being experts, because they're not. They have no freaking clue. And Max Brosmer is a recent example of this. What he has showcased in the preseason is quite alarming, because 32 NFL teams, including the Vikings, passed on him in the NFL draft. And Brosmer, in my opinion, is going to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. When I watch Brosmer play, there's not a single part of me that thinks that he's not Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy has taken the 49ers to multiple Super Bowls. When I watch Brosmer play, there's not a throw where I'm like, McCarthy would have made that throw. So keep an eye out for Brosmer, because what he did in the preseason was phenomenal. And it was very, very interesting to watch and follow. So watch the progression on him and the development of him within the Vikings organization. And also follow McCarthy. Because if McCarthy stinks and is a bust, well, maybe throw in Brosmer. Give him a chance in a year or two. Thanks for joining the show today. Remember to check out 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis and Hokeland Farms Beef for the best beef around. 952-491-1541. 20% off your first order if you tell Jared Tim sent you. Appreciate you all listening, watching. Hit that subscribe button, like button, and hope you all have a wonderful day.